I'm Rye Williams, and what makes me sincerely is living and designing for purpose.
Another episode of Sincerely Ritchurd here. We have Rye Williams of Rye Williams Creative Group. We really appreciate you taking the time out to talk to us. Just tell the people a little bit about yourself. What is Rye Williams? Who are you?
Rye Williams Creative Group is a collective of talented people that are brought together for the purpose of uplifting creativity and art. So fashion is the main focus right now, but in general, art, painting, drawing, pretty much anything. We do all sorts of things to build out photo shoots and to make the most impactful art that we can.
What's been the most fun part about doing that so far?
I think for me, just kind of having traveled my path, being able to give other people an opportunity to do what they do and give them a platform to present their work is been the most rewarding part of the experience. But just having a sense of freedom and being able to be creative is definitely, the most authentic part for me.
Going off that, ability to be creative, seems like you've coined the word smarter fashion or, fashion technology. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so for me, designing is something that is kind of intuitive, coming up with things that people like. It's not really all that complicated. And so when I look at fashion, I say, all right, how do I go beyond that sort of superficial, this is all about the looks, and how do I deliver more? It's all about, having more functionality. It's about figuring out what makes sense on a more intellectual level. And so that phrase, invest in smarter fashion is really what that's all about, is figuring out how to have a style profile that represents you as an intellectual, represents the inner person more so than just that outer facade.
Okay. So is that kind of what you try to do with the Be Prepared for 8 Months with 2 Garments collection?
Yeah, absolutely. So situational versatility, unlimited functionality. I mean, I'm looking at, a couple of jackets, and a scarf, and you pretty much got everything that you need, whether it's rain, snow, super cold weather, whatever it is, you can do a lot with just a couple of garments with my stuff.
Definitely. Was it like one of the pockets you could put a laptop in there or something?
Yeah, so actually pretty much all of the outerwear, I'll say all of the outerwear, you can put actually 2 laptops because the pockets are the same on each side. So you can put laptops in. For me, it's got to be, whatever I put on men's garment, it's got to be on a women's garment. So a women's small has the same functionality as a men's extra large, extra large, whatever.
Do you like working with men's clothing or women's clothing more than one?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I started with menswear. I had no plans on doing anything for women. I had no desire to make women's clothes at all. But then I decided that I was just going to, expand the brand and, make the same sort of style for women. And when I did, I didn't realize that women's clothes didn't have the same sort of functionality as men's. And so when I started working with a female model, and she puts her hand in the pocket on the inside, and she's like, "What? This has pockets?" I was like, "What do you mean? Like, is it not supposed to?" Yeah, and that's when the light bulb kind of went off that women's clothes just weren't very good, and so I started focusing more on developing a women's line, and that's what really kind of. I think people gravitated towards, Instagram is very heavily female, and so that's what I think, really kind of got engaging for the female customer, was just the fact that I was doing something that nobody else felt like was important.
Definitely. It's kind of like you found your niche.
Yeah, I mean, it was always kind of that sort of versatility and making adaptive clothing and that sort of thing. And that was always cool for guys, like I used to do stuff where it was like zip off hoods and, basic stuff like that. And it was cool because it would change the look of the actual garment. but then when it was for women, it was this natural like process of shifting away from purses, shifting away from these silly little bags that you got to carry around because how else are you gonna hold your phone? Like stuff that really doesn't make much sense. It just made sense for that to be a part of my brand.
It makes sense. So like you do all this by yourself, right? And do it all by hand?
Not all by myself, but definitely all by hand. I mean, the patterns and all that stuff, like that's got to come from scratch. You can't just walk into a manufacturer and say, I want this shirt, except I want this type of pocket on there. They're gonna look at you like you're crazy. So having the technical skill to develop patterns and to make garments from scratch, that was a necessary skill in order to be able to do what I'm doing.
Definitely. So what's that design process like? Take us through like a day where you're trying to come up with a garment or trying to finalize something.
So it's not really a day. It's more so like I sat down and said, all right, what do I want to create on a broad level? And it was like, I want this ecosystem of garments that all work together, they fit together, they make sense, and they address all the things that we experience in our everyday lives, So coming up with everything was a matter of listing out, doing Google searches on what people actually do. What are the most common jobs? What are the most common hobbies, lifestyles? How do people actually live? Besides me, how does everybody live? And then it's like, all right, if people like going to coffee shops and drinking coffees, what kind of stuff are they carrying? They're bringing laptops, they're bringing iPads, they're bringing thermoses, all of that stuff. So what is the shape of those things? And so I start mapping out all of that stuff. And then I start looking at the shape of actual garments, and I say, okay, if this shape of a pocket was on this garment, then functionally it will work. Now I need to go back and make this actually look good, and kind of bring it all together. And so I actually design 3 or 4 garments literally right on top of each other because they need to be able to work together. And when they're layered on top of each other, I want them to look good. I want them to work well. They zip into each other. I want everything to hit exactly in the same spot. So I'm designing everything all at once.
Definitely. Sounds nice. It actually sounds like a super intensive process, but you have all the knowledge. So like, I want to know how you got into that because I know you started off as a football player and then you VP of a genetic testing.
Yeah.
So like, how'd you get into this fashion and the knowledge you have now?
So that started a long time ago. When I was a kid, I mean, all day, every day was sports or art. And so, when I wasn't playing sports, I was drawing shoes because I wanted to have my own brand like Michael Jordan. And then I started drawing shorts to match the shoes. And then once my mom saw what I was doing, she said, well, hey, we can make those shorts. Of course, let's do that. And so I made the shorts and I said, hey, if I can make shorts, I can make jeans. I made my first pair of jeans, like, let's do more of this. And I started making more jeans. I sold my first pair of jeans for $50 as a freshman in high school. And that was it for me. Like, that's what I want to do. But that's not really how life works, and I had to keep going through school. I was trying to figure out how to get to college. I knew, I was more likely to get a football scholarship than a fashion scholarship, right? And when I started looking at art schools, they didn't have sports. There weren't the same sort of opportunities for me there. So, I focused a lot more on sports just so I could get into college. I could, get the other things that were also important to me. And so I made the decision that I was going to go to school for business rather than going to school for art. Plus I was already making clothes that people wanted to buy. So, it just kind of made sense to me. And so the whole time I was working on my craft and making stuff and trying to, impress people that I knew and, make stuff for me to go out and, look fresher than everybody else. And so that was just like a regular thing. With the plan that one day I was going to be able to do this by myself. I was going to go out and do my own thing. And when I graduated, the economy was at the very bottom. Like that was when things were at their worst. I lost 2 jobs before I ever started. And it was clear to me that I needed to like figure out how to manage the financial stuff and like how I could like live a life that was free from the financial burden, you know, that financial independence that people talk about, but don't really dedicate themselves to. I dedicated myself to that. And then once that happened, once I had made enough money to, you know, make some stronger investments, and I was like, hey, I'm ready to go do the fashion thing full time. And that happened a year and a half or so ago.
Okay. So does that mean you're doing all your marketing and stuff by yourself? Because
Yeah.
I noticed your work is definitely a lot of graphic. It's very
Yeah. So all of that stuff started early too. You know, you think like when you start sewing clothes at 11, and you know that that's what you want to do. You change everything. Like you change the way you look at school. You change all of your education. So I was learning how to write HTML code. I found Photoshop like early in high school, and I was, you know, started working with that. And so the graphic design, editing, all that stuff was like just something that I was doing. Through college, I made all of our flyers and all that stuff. You know, so it was like that was just part of what I was doing.
Right.
And again, with the understanding that at some point this is going to come in handy. I'm going to want my own website, and I started trying to develop one when I was in college. Had one of the computer science majors build one out for me, but I did all of the graphics work on that site. And so now I'm doing everything. Trying to do less and less, you know, because I'm getting busier and busier. But yeah, I'm doing anything that needs to be done. I'm absolutely doing it myself.
I like that. So what would you say to an aspiring 15-year-old who's trying to get their feet wet? You know, what would be your word of advice for them?
Man, I would say first and foremost, you know, be hungry. Take all the excuses off the table, because the people who really truly build something, they don't stop. Like there's no opportunity to give up if you're actually trying to be successful, and there's going to be those hurdles and those barriers. It's gonna happen. If you're really building something, it's gonna happen. I mean, there's some people who are fortunate enough to like be several steps ahead, you know, coming into the game. They got plenty of money, they got all the resources and all that stuff. But if you're gonna build it, you got to be prepared to fight through everything and to be just determined and relentless about what you're trying to get, because none of this stuff happened on accident for me, and none of this stuff happened through luck. This was a vision that is, you know, 20 years old, and it's been hard, and it's still hard. It's gonna continue to be hard, and I'm not looking at what I've accomplished as that's it. You know, I'm looking at this as I'm still $1.5 billion away from where the brand's supposed to be. You know, so that's going to be a hard road. I'm going to have some real competition. I'm going to have some experienced people who are trying to take my opportunity away.
That's real. I know you feel strongly about, you know, these high-end brands like the Gucci, Louis, and all of that.
Yeah.
So, like, what do you think, you know, we as the culture can do to change, you know, our consumer behavior and not shop with them all the time and shop with, you know, somebody like you or like-minded people?
Yeah. I definitely feel strongly. I mean, I think all of those brands have, you know, great designers working for them. I think that the designers that work for them are exceptionally talented, and they've proven themselves through years and, you know, lifted themselves up through the ranks. And so it's you know, very impressive what those individual designers have done. But there are people outside of those brands that are equally as talented, possibly more talented. And until we understand that and accept that, then we're going to keep spending way more money on stuff that really has no value to us. I think one of the biggest challenges that people have to kind of get over is just, you know, telling the truth. Tell yourself the truth about what this brand means to me. You know, is it really that important to you to look like you have money? Because I know what it means to actually have money, to actually be affluent and to be making a bunch of money. And wearing those brands has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
You know, it really has nothing to do with it. If you're wearing that brand from head to toe, that doesn't mean that you have a higher net worth than me. You know, and like when we had to break out of that lie and understand that it is a lie. I mean, it's all marketing. It's a well-oiled, well-structured machine, and you know we just gotta stop. Like that's all it is. Like you make, just like I say, make the decision that this is gonna be your life. You know, you're gonna own this brand. You're gonna have this sort of lifestyle. You're gonna retire at 30, like I did. Like you gotta decide that. You gotta decide I'm not gonna invest in these brands until they do something for my culture. It's that simple.
How do you feel about the state of the culture now? Like, I know a lot of those brands are taking our wave and taking our design. So, like, what do you feel like we can do to retain our intellectual property?
Man, I mean, we're talking about you know, Black Panther the movie. Like this isn't new. There's something in psychology that is a bias about recency where people think whatever's happening just started happening, but this has always been happening. You know, whether it was in the form of actual human beings being taken from where they belong, or it's gold or whatever it is, I mean, oil, whatever, it doesn't matter. There are resources that have always been taken. And again, you know, it's a decision to not let that happen. You change the dynamic and say, yeah, I will buy all of those brands. And, you know, you notice I'm not going to name any of them by name, but I'll buy all of those brands. All they have to do is, you know, build a school in North Lawndale that's worth going to. You know, like that's what I want to see happen. If they do that, sure, I'll buy it. You know, if we have that attitude towards stuff, then stuff will happen. But right now, all it takes is for a celebrity to wear it, or for them to have more likes than somebody else. Like that's all it takes. Then, you know, that's easy. That's an easy business decision. And for them, that's what it is a business decision. What do I have to put in to get your money out? We need to change that dynamic. I would say, you know, the challenge of figuring out sourcing and figuring out how to get started, that's extremely difficult. That's a very real challenge for everybody. I mean, getting to the point where you can be an effective cut and sew designer and you're buying, you know, bolts of fabric and making stuff out of that, that's very, very difficult. Just because you have to develop that technical skill. Not to say that you shouldn't do it, because I personally want to see more people do it. I hope in 2019 to start actually teaching you know, younger kids to sew and that sort of thing. But sourcing fabric, sourcing people, all that stuff, I think that the major key when you're starting out is to understand that you're starting out. Don't look at the amount of profit that you're making as like this is the way it's always going to be. Your goal has to be to sell units. Your goal has to be to put stuff out that people like and to learn, to figure things out. If you're buying stuff from Joann Fabrics, fine. Like that's not a problem. If you're buying you know, individual units and you're trying to sell one T-shirt, you're trying to sell one pair of jeans, fine. That gets you going, that gets you moving, and it gets other people to support your brand, because that's like the first person to buy a pair of jeans from me, the second person to buy a pair of jeans from me, they still support my brand today because they want to see that early investment. They want to see it pay off, and they like being able to say, yeah, I bought a pair of jeans from him when, you know, the materials weren't right. And being where you're at is an important part of life. Like people keep trying to, you know, they try to bypass these stages, and it ends up backfiring. It really ends up hurting them. You know, you can easily invest $10, $15, $20, $30,000 developing a single garment in fashion. That's easy to do. You shouldn't do it. You should not do that unless you have $100,000 in the bank and you can, you know, afford to lose that money. I don't want to see people start out like that. I want to see people go through all of the steps, learn everything along the way, And eventually you're going to find somebody who wants to see you succeed, who wants to put some money in your pocket so that you can go and invest in some other things. You know, you go through those steps, and it happens. It absolutely happens. So that's what I would say to people. Don't be afraid to be exactly where you're at.
Just, you're based in Chicago, right?
Yep.
What's your take on the Chicago fashion scene and how it's developing?
So I was not deeply involved in Chicago fashion for several years. It was kind of like my own lane, the people who knew me, and then just recently kind of started getting more involved in what was going on in Chicago. And I think the biggest takeaway that I have, both with my business experience and just kind of seeing other environments as well, is that Chicago is large enough to be successful with fashion. There's enough talent, enough talented designers out there. There's enough resources even. I mean, a lot of times people will say, oh, you got to go to New York if you want people to spend money on fashion. That's not true. My customers, buy 2 or 3 garments with me on average, and they're spending hundreds of dollars on everything. I mean, I don't have anything that's less retail, less than $140. So, and that's a scarf, so there are people that are willing to spend money. It's just that we need the sort of leadership and guidance and organization to get all those pieces together, to connect everybody, because the person who wants to buy nice fashion needs to be able to find a designer that's delivering what they're looking for. Otherwise, they're going to get frustrated and they're going to go to New York. And once that happens, how do you get them back? That's the thing that I think is really missing is getting everybody together, being organized, and having the leadership to just take the time to teach people what fashion is, and what it means to develop a line and that sort of thing. Because I think there are a lot of talented artists who are just doing graphic design, putting prints on shirts and that sort of thing, and they get knocked because it's not cut and sew. But if somebody showed them how to sew, they'd be much more likely to do cut and sew, And so, like, getting that answer to the challenging question, I think is an important first step in taking Chicago to that next level.
For sure.
Night. My daughter. Attention to detail. Samsung. My ice. Is that an item? My bad. I don't really watch TV. But on my computer, I watch Netflix downstairs on the couch. Music, definitely. Probably Louis. Well, actually, correct answer is Gucci Mane. Lil Wayne.
Appreciate you taking the time out to chop it up with us today, man. Inviting us into your studio. It was a great time.
Most definitely, man. Thanks for coming out.
Well, man.
Get it,
I'm sorry, this is awkward.